Okay, so might as well start filming. There were also a lot there were I still plan on continuing, is that the proper English phrase? I still plan on continuing with the next series. I still plan on continuing. I still plan to continue on with the series. I think that's what it said. Okay. Oh wow, I've been filming for 30 minutes. Oh my god. Hey, how's it going? How's life? My name is Sophia. Welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I'm going to be doing my November wrap up. Now in the month of November, I read a total of 5 books, and for the most part, I enjoyed everything I read. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into the books I read for the month of November. The first book I read in the month of November is The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. Now, in this story, you are following our main character, Rin, who is a war orphan, and she decides to escape an arranged marriage by getting into the most prestigious academy known as Sinagard. It's a military academy. This is the second book in the Poppy War trilogy, and it picks up immediately after the first one. And in this book, we get to see the world expanded on a whole new level, particularly when it comes to the military and political machinations. We get a lot more of that in this book. I would say that in this book, the themes of war are a lot heavier and a lot darker, and we start to see how this takes a toll on our main characters, and we get to see them slowly becoming desensitized, I would say, to the horrors of war. There were also newer themes of imperialism and religion in the Dragon Republic, and I thought that that was super well done. Kuang explores how religion is used to dehumanize and conquer the people of Nakara. I found that there was a lot of parallels between the Hesperian religion and Christianity, and how it's used to go into other nations and educate the people on the proper religion, while often dehumanizing, degrading, and conquering and taking over their lands. Me and my friends are hosting a read-along for the Poppy War trilogy, and we did a live show, and so I will leave that linked down below if any of you guys are interested in checking out any more of our spoilery thoughts. The next book I read in the month of November, is probably one of my most disappointing reads of this year, and that is going to be The Name of All Things by Jen Lyons. Now, if you've seen my last wrap up, you know that I loved and adored The Ruin of Kings by Jen Lyons, and this felt like a step down to me from the original book. In the first book, we are following our main character, Kieran, who is locked in a jail cell, and the story starts off with him basically telling his story of how he ended up there. And the concept is very basic, but the execution was just so unique and different, and I really loved it. I really loved how the world was explored. I loved the characters. I loved everything about The Ruin of Kings. This, however, not so much. So one of my bigger gripes, I guess, is that in the first book I was so attached to in the first book I was so attached to the characters, but in this one we get a whole new cast of characters, and I just didn't connect to them as much as I would have liked. Another thing is that I really enjoyed the plot in the first book. The plot in this one isn't as interesting, in my opinion, as the first one. And then also the pacing in the first book, I'm just comparing the first and the second book, but oh well. But the pacing in the first book was action-packed, non-stop, had me at the edge of my seat, and this one was a lot slower, and I wouldn't have minded the slower pace if I was attached to the characters, but alas, I wasn't. I also found that the world building isn't as immersive as the first one. The first one had a lot of showing of the world building versus this one, which had a lot of telling. So in this book, we're specifically following a different culture. It's the Juratees culture. And throughout the story, the people are explaining how the culture operates. It's like, this is how we operate. This is what a stallion means. This is what a mare means. This is how we do things. And I wasn't the biggest fan of that either. Overall, I don't think that this was a bad book. I did give it a 3 stars, but just compared to the first one, it just wasn't as good in my opinion. I still plan to continue on with this series. I have heard that the third book is a lot better. I started the third book and so far, but yeah, 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was for our book club pick of the month, and that is going to be Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. Okay. So editing Sophia here because I didn't like the way I summarized Black Sun. But in this story, you're basically following 3 main perspectives. Narampa, who is a sun priest, Shala, who is a teak, which is like this mermaid type siren creature, and then Serapio, who is the vessel of a god. In the beginning of the story, Shala is hired to take Serapio to Tova, which is where the sun priest lives. And basically this story is a countdown to the winter eclipse. And so we're just following these 3 separate perspectives, and then we get to see how their stories converge. But yeah, that's basically what the story is about. Hopefully that was a decent summary for you guys. So in terms of plot, this is a very slow plot. The author is really taking her time to build up towards the climax, but I will say that the ending felt a little bit rushed to me. I felt that the author could have added maybe 50 or so pages and the pacing would have flowed a lot more smoothly. There are quite a few themes of discrimination, xenophobia in this story. So Narampa comes from a lower class and she was able to become one of the most highest ranking figures in society. And so for that, her authority is constantly being questioned and undermined. And then you have Shala, who is a teak, which they're kind of like these mermaid sea creatures. And as a result, she also faces a lot of discrimination. Another thing about this story is that there are quite a few of gender non-binary, non-conforming characters. And it felt very natural to the story, in my personal opinion. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like the author was just putting them there for diversity brownie points. Shala, as a main character, is bisexual as well. So if you're looking for representation, I would recommend picking this up. I loved Serapio and Shala's perspective. I thought that the chemistry and the slow burnness of it all was just delicious. Loved it so much. I will say that the ending of this book ended on a cliffhanger, and personally I didn't really mind it. If you are sensitive to that, maybe wait closer until the release date of the second book before picking this up. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. The reason why I'm not giving this a higher rating is because personally I didn't feel super attached to the characters. Besides Shala, I loved Shala. She was my favorite character out of all of them. I felt that particularly Narampa made certain decisions and did some stuff that I'm just like, honey, why would you do that? Like, no. And also because of the pacing, it was, as I said, it was kind of slow. It took me a while to get into, but overall this is an enjoyable read. I am curious to pick up the second book in this series, but I think I'll wait until more reviews come out about that before picking it up. The next book I read in the month of November is Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. In this world, there is basically bone shard magic. So by the time a kid reaches 6 or 7 years old, a piece of their bone is taken out from like the back of their skull or like from behind their ear, and it's used to power these magical constructs. And so you can basically inscribe these constructs with different orders to power them. It's basically artificial intelligence, but make it magic. In this story, we are following our main character, Lynn, who is the Emperor's daughter. She isn't his heir though. And she is basically in competition with her foster brother to become the heir of the empire. But there is also rebellions going on throughout the land. I will say that the concept felt super interesting, but the execution was lacking just a bit for me. The pacing was super slow and nothing really happened until like the last 10% of the book. It's one of those situations, again, like Black Sun, where I felt the author could have tacked on 50 more pages and it would have smoothed out the pacing just a bit. In terms of the characters, I wasn't really attached to any of the characters. I didn't really care what happened to them. So as a result, it was very difficult for me to get invested into the story. I will say that the strongest aspect of this story is the bone shard magic. It's a very interesting magic system that I personally haven't read of before. This is a first book in a series, so the author is laying down the groundwork, and I feel like the next book in the series will explore bone shard magic in a bit more detail. Because Lynn is our main character and she's in competition to become the heir, a lot of the magic system is explored through her perspective. So we're discovering more about the magic system as she learns more as well. If I had to give this a rating, I would give it a 3 out of 5 stars. It's fairly enjoyable. I am still intrigued enough to consider picking up the second book in a series. Keep in mind, this is written by a debut author, and I think that Andrea Stewart did a really good job with the story, and so I am curious to see how her writing improves in her next book. The next book I read in the month of November is The Rape of Nanking by Irish Chang. This is about what people call the forgotten Holocaust that happened in China during World War II. This is the optional nonfiction book for our Poppy War read-along. Trigger warnings for anything, possibly everything you can imagine: mutilation, sexual assault, suicide. If you're sensitive to any of those things, be very cautious when picking this up. This took me a while to read. I started reading this around the same time I started the Poppy War earlier this year, and it's taken me quite a while to finish. And the reason for this is because this is such a hard story to read. It is so devastating. The Rape of Nanking is known to have inspired chapter 21 of the Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, but it's not just chapter 21. There are moments from the Rape of Nanking that are sprinkled throughout the entire Poppy War trilogy, and so if you're interested in seeing the inspiration for the Poppy War trilogy, I highly recommend picking this up. This nonfiction book has 3 different sections. So you're following the first section, which is from the Japanese soldiers' perspective, and then the civilians, and then you get to see it on a global Western European perspective as well. And we get to see how not only these atrocities managed to happen, but also how the entire world basically played a part in erasing, or in trying to erase, this narrative from history. I didn't give this a rating because it is a nonfiction and I don't tend to rate a lot of nonfictions. But yes, I still highly recommend picking this up. It's important to educate yourself on the horrors of what happened in Nanking. But yeah, those are all the books I read in the month of November. Feel free to comment down below. Let me know some of the books you guys read in the month of November. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope to see you soon with another video. And until then, I will see you soon. Bye.